So I want you to think about warfare from a realism approach for just a minute. War is really, really brutal, and not just for the soldiers who are fighting it, but it tends to be pretty brutal for all of the civilians who have to experience it. That is going on all around them as well. Think about some of the more destructive wars in our own history. All of the damage that was done across Europe and Asia with World War II, for example, but there's lots and lots of examples as you go back through history. The 30 Years' War was extremely destructive. They just have this tendency to be extremely destructive, both in terms of you're pulling farmers away from the fields, you're having soldiers who tend to go foraging slash pillaging, which is basically stealing all the food that they can find from all the homes that they come across. Things like that. It just tends to be plague and pestilence and disease and famine. All of these things tend to go along with war, on top of the destruction of buildings and things like that, and of course the countless deaths. So, all right, that's enough of a gory image right there, but I did want you to think about warfare from a realism perspective. Now let's think about it from the world of Warhammer perspective, which is also extremely brutal, right? I mean, Warhammer is just a brutal fantasy world. And so the reason why I'm bringing all this up, if you like the idea of that brutality being reflected in the game, then we've got a really good mod for that. But now let's talk about the game from a functional perspective. And if you're the type of player who really likes to get that sense of accomplishment, that not only once you've conquered a new settlement, for example, you've added to your empire, and that's a little bit of a sense of accomplishment right there, obviously, but also then you have to build up that new settlement into being something good. In other words, sort of the building aspect of this game, if you get some enjoyment out of that, well, this mod is going to help amplify that. And then on top of it all, really the main thing that this mod does, if you're the type of person who wishes that this game wasn't by default such a steamrolling experience where it's just so easy to roll over one settlement after another, once you get going, you're kind of unstoppable. You're just taking settlement turn after turn after turn. But if you prefer something where you have to slow down a little bit, and once you take a new settlement, you have to kind of stop and breathe for a minute through a combination of getting less replenishment and having to sort of take a little bit longer to defend that new settlement before you move on to the next one, little things like that. Anyway, that's what this mod is really going to help with. The mod, of course, that I'm talking about is Campaign Ammo and Devastation by Lorgel. And he's got just a really short description here, so I'm going to go ahead and read it out, and then we're going to just talk about what all it does in the game with lots of examples, of course. So, what does it do? Ammo used in battles carries over to the campaign map. At the start of the turn, units will recover 10 ammo, or a percentage of their ammo if they have over 50 max ammo. Also adds Devastation, which is a health bar for settlements. If the settlement is damaged by being captured, sacked, razed, raided, etc., the health bar will decrease. The health bar heals 1 point per turn. Each point of damage lowers replenishment and ammo recovered by 10%. Basically, this mod slows snowballing through enemy territory by stopping armies from instantly recovering to fighting form in recently captured territory. Encourages a little more strategic play. Okay, boom. Let's go ahead and go back to this. So let's take a look here at what this is doing in this campaign. I'm playing Crone Hellebron here, and I have finally finished off taking this first province, for example. And this is a really good snapshot of what this mod does. I know he lists the ammo thing first, and that's fine. I'll show you an example of what that looks like up here. So we just took Quark here with one of our lords, and you can see these dark shards have this little ammunition meter now after having fought this battle. And this will drop precipitously if you start fighting multiple battles turn after turn, and they only recover it very, very slowly. But that's, to me, not. I like that, by the way. I do think that that's a nice feature. But that's, to me, not the main thing that this mod does. The main thing that this mod does is this right here, where you can see each settlement has this little green bar along the side, or right here, there's actually only 3 orange. So basically, this is the settlement health. So this is measured from 1 to 10. You can see the black pillar here has a health of 3. And Quark, which we just took up here, and we had been raiding this territory before we took it, that's all the way down to 0. Actually, we were not only raiding it, but also I think I may have sacked it once as well. Anyway, so it's all the way down to 0. And as he mentions here, you only get 1 health back per turn. So if nothing bad happens, the black pillar is going to require 7 more turns before it gets up to full settlement health. And Kawark here is going to take 10. So, yeah, and as far as I know, there's nothing you can do to speed that up. And what are the impacts of it? Well, you can see down here in the lower left-hand corner, badly damaged, the black pillar here is providing a minus 35% casualty replenishment rate and also a drop in local recruitment capacity. And then if we look at Kawark here, that's even worse here. That's massively damaged. Casualty replenishment rate minus 50%. Local recruitment capacity minus 3. So I'm not even sure if yeah, okay. I can still do recruiting, but I'm not sure what the normal would be. There's probably a minimum that that it'll reduce it to, so that you can still do a little bit of recruiting. But anyway, as you can see, we're not getting any replenishment here, even though we own the settlement. We now own the entire province. We're not getting any replenishment, and you're going to consistently see this where you'll take a new settlement, you're not getting any replenishment right away, even when you've start adding in heroes to add additional replenishment boosts and things like that. There is a way to start getting a little bit of replenishment, and we've got that. As you can see, our characters here are getting a little bit, but the units are not getting any. So it really does have a slowing down effect on your campaigns, and it gives you that sense of, okay, we've conquered this territory, but this territory is in really bad shape, and it really, it's going to take a while before this becomes a fully functional settlement. Which, again, in vanilla, it doesn't really make a whole heck of a lot of sense that you capture a brand new settlement. May have been a completely different type of a racial population in the settlement that you took over, and bam, as soon as you take it over, it's small, but it's a fully functional, no negative modifiers type of a settlement. Well, obviously, this is going to change that. Now, the mod that this closely compares to is probably the slower expansion and settlement supply lines mod, which I have talked about quite a lot on this channel, which is, again, one of my favorites. I really like it. This does some of the same things. I would say that one is probably a little bit more impactful / more challenging for your campaign because of the massive penalty to that you take to your public order, in addition to your growth and the replenishment. This one is much more focused on just reducing the replenishment. To be quite honest, the replenishment is probably enough, but for people who want the ultimate challenge, I would still recommend going with the slower expansion mod. But for people who want to get the anti-snowball effect without maybe going all the way that you go in that particular mod, this one is a good substitute for it. I will say, do not try to use the two of them together. They are almost certainly incompatible. Certainly they both do overlap when it comes to certain things like the replenishment. If you use them together, you may not get a crash, but you probably are not going to get the results that you're looking for. I'm going to talk about a few other mods here that you're probably not going to want to use this with as well. I'm going to go ahead and first of all, let me go ahead and show right here. This is a couple of battles later. You can see the increasing effects, I should say the compounding effects of the diminishing ammo right here. The reason why we're still looking okay in terms of a replenishment and everything is actually because we're in the middle of a Death Knight, which I think is what is providing me the ability to get the replenishment in enemy territory, or it might it might be Blood Queen here. Yes, right there. Your armies and those of the Blood Voyage will replenish slowly, even in unknown territory. So anyway, that's why you're seeing that. But keep in mind the replenishing would normally be lower than this, and of course the ammunition is very much reflective of what this mod is going to do. So you can already start to see how you fight too many battles without giving your missile units enough time to replenish some of their ammo, and they're going to be almost useless on the battlefield, which, is, you could maybe quibble about whether it's balanced correctly, whether it is truly realistic in terms of they wouldn't be getting ammunition back any faster than this. But I think it's a pretty good setting that it's at right now. And then the other thing that I did want to point out then, so first of all, they sallied out over the end turn while I was encircling them, and their settlement did not suffer any damage at all. But I do want to now go ahead and show you, I probably don't need to do the skill ups first before I do this. I do want to show you what happens then when we go ahead and take a new settlement. I'll just auto-resolve this as long as I'm not going to lose any units here. This right here, boom, you can see the settlement health dropped all the way down to 5 out of 10. So if you just do no raiding at all on your way in and simply fight the battle and take it over and occupy it immediately, this is the least amount of destructiveness that can happen to the settlement, which is 50%. So it's still going to take 5 turns for this settlement to recover to be back to full health. And in the meantime, let's look at the effect that we've got here. You can see moderately damaged, minus 25% casualty replenishment rate for the armies in the region, and a -1 to the local recruitment capacity. So there you have it. We're getting really good replenishment because we're in the middle of the Blood Night, but hopefully this one's obviously doing a little bit less well. But normally when you do take on, when you do occupy a new settlement, you'll actually have effectively 0 replenishment unless you've just got really crazy replenishment buffs like we do right now. All right, now one mod that I want to talk about in particular in terms of whether or not to use it with this one is the War of Attrition mod, which reduces replenishment. And of course, there are a couple of other mods out there that do the same thing, where they just reduce the amount of replenishment bonuses that you get from things like your lords and heroes and technologies and so on and so forth. Basically, everything that gives you a boost to your replenishment has been nerfed. Now, as I've pointed out here, we're playing a legendary lord who's actually got quite good replenishment, and with the War of Attrition mod activated, it still gets nerfed into basically non-existence. If you like this, then by all means you can use them together, but most of the time I'm going to recommend not using the War of Attrition mod or any others that reduce the bonuses that you get to your replenishment rate, just because when you combine it with what the campaign ammo and Devastation mod is doing in terms of the replenishment rates, it probably becomes too much. It just gets a little bit ridiculous to the point where you're just not getting any replenishment at all for extremely long periods of time, which is probably beyond realistic and just at the point of being punishing at that point. So here we can see what it's like with without the mod. Same exact situation as compared to with the mod. The mod meaning War of Attrition. Now let's look at some of the other factions just to make sure that we can kind of get a sense of, how universal this is. This is a Heinrich Himmler campaign. No War of Attrition or any other replenishment reducing mods other than the main one. And we're getting decent replenishment here despite the debuff that's happening from the, I'm going to just start calling it the CAAD mod. But this is because we have invested skill points into increasing our replenishment rate. We step outside of the settlement and we have obviously reduced replenishment at that point, but it's not non-existent. A couple of unusual situations or special situations that you may want to think of. One, for example, is, well, what happens with Scarbrand's drawn to destruction mechanic? So here we have an example where we are drawn to destruction here at a settlement, Agral Middal here, and when we do that, it's coming in at settlement health 1. And I think that's probably pretty representative of the destruction that we caused when we ruined the settlement. Just beware that it is going to be a bit of a nerf to legendary lords like Scarbrand, who are going to be getting basically all of their new settlements. Well, not all of them, because you can occupy with him, but a lot of your new settlements are going to be starting out all the way down at settlement health 1. It's going to take a long time before they become viable settlements. Now here's an example of what happens when we, using Scarbrand and a Blood Host for additional reinforcements, and we sack it instead of occupying it. And so we have reduced the health of Stormhenge here, and because of that, whether we're in raiding stance or in encampment stance, it doesn't matter. We're not getting any replenishment here to reflect the fact that this countryside has now been fairly well devastated. Now, one thing that I did notice, which may be a bug, I'm not absolutely certain about it, but it kind of feels that way to me, is that we just took the settlement here of Granti Mingal, and as you can see, it's got settlement health of 0, and yet we're not seeing anything listed in the province effects that shows that we should have reduced replenishment. And indeed, with Scarbrand, we are getting replenishment, which is definitely not what you would expect to have happen when you're in the region of a settlement whose health is all the way down to 0. But here we are one turn later, and when we take a look at it, the health is up to 1 out of 10, and all of a sudden the province effect for Granti Mingal has now shown up. You can see massively damaged, minus 45% to replenishment rate, local recruitment capacity minus 3, and Scarbrand is no longer getting any replenishment. So yeah, a little bit weird. It didn't happen for one turn, but one turn later it does seem to be working just fine. So I'm going to assume that that was a bug for one turn there where we were not getting the proper reduction to replenishment. And this is the only time I saw it. I don't want to say how often this happens. Couldn't guess, but it did only happen to me one time in about 3 different campaigns that I played using this. Now, one thing that I think would be really nice to see is, like, right here we are in a Scrag campaign, and we're raiding the Border Prince's territory, and they are raiding our territory. And as you can see here, raiding does have an effect on settlement health. So it appears to me that you're seeing a -3 to raiding, -3 to settlement health when you're raiding. And of course, if at the same time, if there's already been some damage, like from the previous turn's raiding, then you're also getting 1 back. So the first turn that your settlement gets raided, you can expect to see a drop of 3, unless your settlement was already below 10 for some reason. But then moving forward from that point, it's going to look like you're losing 2 per turn, because you're losing 3 from the raiding, but you're getting 1 back because settlements always get 1 back per turn. But as I was starting to say, one thing I would like to see is the tooltip get updated so that you know how much effect that raiding it would be causing to the settlement health, because you just have to I had to experiment and test it out to really know what the effects were. Likewise, the same thing is true when you occupy settlements, or you loot and occupy them, or you sack them. It would be nice if those tooltips for each of those would also tell you how much damage is happening to the settlement health. Now, again, once you start playing with the mod for a little while, you start to know exactly what's going to happen. You don't need it anymore, but for people who are just starting out with this mod, that would be really nice. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at that. I think it's a pretty straightforward mod. We've gone through some examples. I've talked about using this with and without the attrition mod. I recommend not using it with the War of Attrition mod, because the level of replenishment that you get is is nerfed all the way down to the point where you're just not getting any for extended periods of time. But again, some people may like that. Also recommend not using this side by side with the slower expansion settlement supply lines mod, because they're almost certainly going to overlap, could conflict. I'm not sure, it might even cause your game to crash, but they do obviously accomplish the same things, so you don't really need both. Again, just to reiterate, I think the slower expansion and settlement supply lines is probably overall more challenging, so if you're looking for the ultimate challenge, maybe go with that one. But this one is absolutely worth a try for anybody who that idea that I started out this video with appeals to, which is if you're looking just for something to slow down the snowballing effect that happens in this game, or you're just looking for that extra element of realism in your campaign where, you know, it more accurately is behaving like how destructive warfare really is, or then if you just want that extra little sense of accomplishment that you can get from not only conquering a new territory but building it back up to the point where, you know, it's a healthy part of your empire, you know, any of those I think are perfectly good reasons to try this mod. And for that reason, I'm going to recommend this to just about anybody who any of those things appeals to. All right, anyway, I'll go ahead and leave it at that. Again, as always, if you've got any experience with this mod, please do mention it in the comments. That can be useful to all of us. And if it's something that, you know, is contradictory or, you know, really, really important to be conveyed beyond what I've said in this video, I'll make sure either with a subsequent video or something like that to make sure that that information gets passed on. But anyway, thanks everybody so much for watching and listening, and I will see you all in the next video.